It's episode 12, bro.
Oh, hey, everybody. You're back with Dave and Ed. This is episode 12 of To the Death podcast.
Today, we sit down with Brian McLaughlin. He is the head instructor and owner of
Precision Boxing and MMA.
He was a former professional fighter. We get into if he might do a comeback or so.
Or not.
Or not, maybe. We get into that. Also, he was very impressed by my MMA knowledge.
You know one thing.
I knew the right thing.
You knew one thing.
Come on, you weren't impressed by the thing that I knew?
No, I don't really like MMA at all. Is that weird?
You can't say that. You can't say that. What
but
are you talking
is it weird to be so into jiu-jitsu but to not like MMA?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm weird.
No, come on. You used to like MMA.
I watch it, but I'm not like... We talked about this when you were asking who I wanted, Ferguson or Khabib. I don't care. Somebody is going to win.
Well, whatever. Brian's jiu-jitsu style is very MMA based.
He has such a high fight IQ. I was stunned.
He was the guy version of Emily. I mean, he was too knowledgeable for us. We tried to keep up.
The things that he knows, the philosophies he has, maybe even his perspectives.
Very unique perspective.
He wanted to find training himself. He'll tell you about it. Just sit back and listen. But the only way to ensure he had good training was to start a gym. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. So... what have you been up to lately, though, Ed? You're looking trim. You down any weight?
Don't say I'm looking trim.
You're down like 17 pounds.
No, I am down 4 pounds.
4 pounds.
I worked out every day this week, and I'm going to try to keep it up. I'm on a new schedule.
Wow.
So
I'm up 4 pounds. So everything you lose, I gain. I'm going to have to start wearing your clothes soon.
Well, my clothes don't even fit me. I have to get new clothes, but that's why I'm trying to lose the weight so I can fit back into my old clothes.
Did you do any jiu-jitsu this week? Because I know you were supposed to train and you bailed on us.
I absolutely did 1 day of training.
Oh, my goodness.
It was today.
It's a good thing that you weren't there, though, because you would have been very embarrassed for me. Ron almost choked me to death.
I wish you did.
To death.
You know, Brian says to the death in this episode, just like in passing.
Yes, I know. I heard it. Yes. As he was talking about some of the philosophies that he had, some of his perspectives, my jaw was dropping. Like, wow, I never thought of that. That's great. That's awesome. You're so right.
Yes, we get into the points again, and obviously we keep talking about the points over and over again, but his perspective was quite unique and robust.
I was going to say robust. You cut me off.
All right, we got to stop making the same jokes, all right?
He has a plethora of stuff. I don't know.
Anything else? I want to get them into it now.
Get who into it?
The people. They want to hear it now. They're sick of us.
I know. They want to hear it.
Anything else before we get into it?
We need to get video, though.
Well,
you know.
I know, but we got to get the video. And then Brian has rolled with both of us many times. We got to get the video on that. And our future, things are going to start opening up. We're getting ready for the video. So I hope everybody pays attention to our YouTube channel, To the Death Podcast on YouTube. We are going to start doing more and more videos as time progresses.
Also, people, listen. We need your help. We have been in talks with several people about sponsorships, but you can help us by rating us on iTunes or Google. You can go to Google, you can rate us. If you have an iPhone, you can go to iTunes, you can rate the podcast. I'm sure you can do that on other podcast platforms. Also, follow us on all social media. That'll really help us.
That is absolutely correct. So do all that stuff, but first, listen to this podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy. This is To the Death Podcast.
Episode something.
It's episode 12, bro.
Episode 12. All right, relax. Happy birthday to you.
Please stop it.
Come on.
No. This isn't even coming out anywhere close to my birthday, so it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't matter. It's your birthday right now.
All right, good for me.
Happy birthday, Ed.
Happy birthday, Ed.
Oh, thanks, Yanni. Yanni forgot all about my birthday, too.
Sorry, dude. Sorry, Ed.
Aren't you on Facebook?
I am.
He's been busy.
I do birthdays on Facebook, 100%.
All right, that's enough. Let's. We're sitting down with somebody here, and you're going to talk about me all day?
It's your birthday. It's an
right.
important day. I want everyone else to know that. Make sure you reach out to Ed on Facebook and Instagram and wish him a happy birthday. You guys know how much he likes feedback.
Not birthday feedback. All right, today we're sitting with Brian McLaughlin. We're at Yanni's at Up Top Martial Arts. Brian, it's great that you sit down with us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you for your time.
So what we've been doing is just kind of giving a background of the area, North Jersey, New York, just the tri-state area of jiu-jitsu, how it came to be. And you're part of kind of Yanni's class. late 90s, early 2000s starting, and we just kind of wanted to start from there, like what jiu-jitsu was like compared, because people that listen to our podcast are white belts, blue belts, they have no clue that it was way different back then than it is today.
Yeah, that's actually something that drives me nuts. I train a lot of mixed martial artists, and I have a whole wall where I have like kind of an homage to jiu-jitsu history, and one of them is like an artistic painting of Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and the guy goes, "Who's that?" And I'm like, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. And he's like, "Oh." And it's funny to me because like the greatest day of my jiu-jitsu life was I was on the Ultimate Fighter, and actually right before I got sent home because I broke my nose, Nogueira said I had good jiu-jitsu. And like anytime I'm feeling low, like I find out my academy's got closed for COVID, or like, you know, I get in a fight with my girlfriend, I just close my eyes and I think about Nogueira saying, "Good jiu-jitsu, my man." And like the world's okay, and this guy doesn't even know who this person is.
But Ed didn't know who that was either.
No, I know who Antonio Nogueira is.
I don't believe you.
No, because when I started jiu-jitsu, it was because of guys like that. Like, he was in the prime. I started in 2007. I started because of guys like him, Chuck Liddell. They were fighting in different things, but I knew Pride and UFC. He was a big part of the growth of MMA, the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
In different things, different fighting organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually on my list, so why don't we just get right into that?
Go ahead. Do whatever you want.
So, Brian, you are involved with a lot of different fighters right now, and you have fighters competing in many organizations. Out of all the organizations that you deal with, who's your favorite to deal with?
I would actually say Ryzen.
Ryzen. And which fighters in Ryzen?
My fighter, Lindsey Van Zant, had an opportunity to fight in Ryzen. And first, it's just the culture of the Japanese versus the culture of the Americans, especially with regard to martial arts, is extremely different. They treat you not just like you're a professional athlete. They give you a reverence, like they are extremely happy that you're there and that you're someone of high respect. When I went to Ryzen, man, it was they had us staying at the nicest hotel I've ever seen in my life. I actually looked because we went out there a little early. And I was like, well, let's just stay at the same hotel that Ryzen's going to have us stay at. And I looked, it was like $600 a night. It was something outrageous. And, you know, they put you up there. They're also one of the only places that gives you like a per diem. Like they just give you money. They also put someone in charge to make sure that you know where you're going, you know what you're doing. Then the show itself, there's just, it's such a spectacle. And at all points, the fighters are just given so much respect, not just by the organization, and this is kind of out of the organization's hands, but by the fans. When you're in Japan, if I'm your fan, the first thing I'm going to do if I see you is I'm going to very quietly wait until we make eye contact. I'm going to bow to you and I'm going to hand you a gift. And the gift is almost always something practical. Like, oh, an extra toothbrush. I really needed this. Oh, they gave me face wipe. You know, actually, it's a little hot in here. I could use these. You know, but some stick of chewing gum, a fan, like, and they'll just thank you. They at most might ask for a picture. Usually, no, they just want to tell you they're fans and they walk away and leave you alone. They never want to inconvenience you. Whereas, you know, I've been with guys that are fighting, and this is everywhere from an amateur fight in Atlantic City to a UFC main event. People just shove something in your face and say, sign it. Sometimes they don't know who you are. They don't care. They just know that they could resell this on eBay. And then, and they'll do it right. I was with a fighter that was once pretty brutally knocked out. They're walking, not even able to quite put one foot in front of the other. And a fan will not take 2 seconds to jump in front of their face and say, hey, sign this. Yeah, great. Whereas in Japan, the amount of reverence they have for you is ridiculous. There's even an artist that goes around and draws like caricatures of his favorite American fighters and coaches. And so my friend Andy fought for Pancrase out there. Pancrase treated us similarly. Ryzen just had more money. So that's why I would say that I thought that was the organization that treated us the best.
So now these Japanese fans, they're giving you gifts. Ever in the back of your mind when one of them hands you a toothbrush, are you like, do I have something stuck in my teeth? Or a stick of gum? Oh, is my breath bad? Does any of that ever cross your mind?
If it did, I don't even think they would say anything.
No,
they're so polite.
So polite, respectful. It's kind of just like the Eastern philosophy that they live by out there. What do you think about the fact that they know the jiu-jitsu? Like when you do a pass or something, you hear them clap, and they're very attentive and in tune to what's going on in the fight itself.
Well, I mean, the level of respect even goes to when the athletes are fighting. You feel like you're fighting in a library. Like everyone, actually, I have the same fighter, Lindsay. She's fighting in Invicta. She's the co-main event coming up. She's going out there to fight in Kansas City soon. I think she's fighting the first weekend in July. And there's not going to be a crowd. And at first she was like, ooh, is that going to be different? I'm going to be like, it's just going to be like when you fought in Japan, because they're perfectly silent, except they'll give you like a little PGA Tour golfer's clap when something happens. But yeah, they really do appreciate the groundwork. You're not going to get stood up just because someone's closed a guard. In America, the generic fan kind of looks down on you if you prefer to wrestle or if you prefer to grapple as opposed to, standing up and throwing down. Whereas in Japan, all they care about is that you're showing your art and that you are fighting with courage. As long as you're doing that, they have a greater appreciation for the technical side of things.
Well, what about the ring? Do you think the ring plays a factor at all in the fact that you could see better or anything, or is that not really part of it?
No, the ring is a huge factor. Most of my fights were in rings, and that takes a while to explain to some of the newer people that come in when you're talking about kind of the generational gap that exists. They'll see pictures of me fighting, and they're like, what were you doing in a ring? I'm like, this is what we used to do, especially when they couldn't afford to get cages. But the biggest difference in the ring is the fact that you can corner someone very easily, whereas in a cage, especially since a lot of these cages are circular, you have a ton of space to move around. But also, you can't be pinned up against the ropes the same way you can be pinned up against a cage. And then there's a safety factor, though. The reason that I don't like when people fight in rings is that you can very easily go through the ropes and very badly hurt yourself. Even in like boxing, I think that happened to Bernard Hopkins
I was just gonna
pretty
bring that up.
recently.
Yeah.
Actually, a friend of mine, Zuri Lawrence, he's a professional boxer. He was fighting Hasim Rahman and was winning the fight. He took the fight very, very late notice, and but he got hit and he fell through the ropes and smacked his head on the ground. And I mean, he got himself up and went back in, but that caused a shift, and he ended up losing the fight by knockout in the last round. I always wondered what would happen if he didn't go through the ropes. So that's always a concern. Also, grabbing the cage is usually pretty strictly enforced, but grabbing ropes almost never is. A great example of that is if you ever saw Fedor Emelianenko fight Matt Lindland. Lindland hoists him up, quite clearly has him dead to rights. Fedor grabs the rope, and kind of pulls himself into the mount as a result, and then, takes Lindland out, and no one ever called it.
Do you think that has something to do with that he was like the pinnacle then, or no?
I would say yes, except for the fact that I've seen it happen in so many other instances that I can't point to that as being, they didn't go way out of their way. The fight where they went way out of their way for Fedor is if you ever saw his fight with Fabio Maldonado, where Maldonado, the fight should have been stopped 3 different points. He absolutely murders him, and they called a 10-9 round. And Fedor ends up winning a decision, which quite clearly he shouldn't have had.
That's a whole different thing. The 10-9, 10, I feel like they don't give out 10-8s or 10-7s almost never when they should. Like in any
There's never a 10-7.
There's been a 10-7
There
before.
can be. I can't recall a time.
I've seen it once. It was with, he fought against Rich Franklin, got knocked out. Nate Quarry. He had a fight with somebody.
I know who you're talking about. He fought Caleb Starnes.
Yeah,
and Caleb Starnes ran away as a protest over his UFC pay. And basically, Nate Quarry just followed him all around. It was in Canada. I remember that.
That was a ridiculous
Caleb
fight.
Starnes is a Canadian, and that ruined his career after that. But yes, that's actually.
But only a ridiculous sense.
It's funny that he was just picking on you for not knowing your MMA
Jiu-jitsu. Listen, I know Caleb Starnes was on an episode
Either
or
way,
a season of the UFC,
to
right?
pick
The
that
Ultimate
out
Fighter.
as the 10-7 round, that shows a good bit of
There you go.
knowledge.
Wow.
Give me
He's
some.
already on your side.
There we go.
Listen, that's enough of this guest. Move to the next one. We can have no one else that sides with Ed. But I'd like to real quick back it up just for people listening. How old are you, and what years were you fighting in these cages? Or I'm sorry, in these rings?
I am 36 years old. I started jiu-jitsu in November of 99. I had my first MMA fight in, 2006. And I was active, kind of competing professionally from 2006 until, when the heck did I stop fighting? Like 2011.
So you started with jiu-jitsu though first?
Yeah. You were talking about the differences from when people start, and now a lot of people come into jiu-jitsu, and I kind of credit this to Joe Rogan for exposing the world to it. They're like, oh, jiu-jitsu is a martial art that has its own sport, it has its own culture, and I go in there to lose weight and to make friends and to be part of this, different avenue of competing. That wasn't my experience. No one knew what jiu-jitsu was, especially Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I always laugh at people talk about cultural appropriation these days, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm in America learning a South American interpretation of an East Asian art. But I started because a bunch of people I knew were getting into fights when I was in high school, and I was a very small kid. I kind of was a late bloomer, and I wasn't very confident, so I just was trying to have something in case someone decided to throw down after homeroom that I would be prepared.
So now it might be just because of the time that you started. I know that you're a big proponent of strikes in jiu-jitsu or doing jiu-jitsu with striking, and you're a big fan of Javi Vasquez.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that influence how I feel about that. And basically, I feel like jiu-jitsu is going or has been going in a similar path to more traditional martial arts that have a longer shelf life in the United States. Things like taekwondo and karate. And now when I say that, immediately people think, oh, that means that you're saying it's going to be watered down and belts are going to be sold. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that karate and taekwondo move towards a tournament style of training and away from a martial style of training. So when you watch two taekwondo guys spar or compete, they oftentimes have their hands at their knees. Why? Because you can't punch to the face. You can kick to the face, but you're a little quicker if you can tag the body. Or similarly, if you saw point karate, where it's just who touches who first. So you jet in with this little punch. And now what it is this. Why I chose jiu-jitsu was because it worked. Now, what do I mean when I say it worked? It meant in a fully resisting combat situation, when someone didn't want to be taken down, held down, submitted, you could do those things to them. In the absence of a preordained set of ridiculous rules, in the absence of a point system. That's why I chose jiu-jitsu. That's why jiu-jitsu flourished in the United States. And now it's moving into a very specialized sportive structure. And some people are okay with that. But that's not why I started. And that's not why I wanted to become a great jiu-jitsu artist. It wasn't because I thought that I was going to be able to manipulate lapels really well. It's because I thought through learning this, I will be able to be a great artist, a martial artist, someone that's fighting in a way of war, in a dueling style.
So then you would say that you're a big fan of the route Eddie Bravo's taking with the combat jiu-jitsu.
Oh, absolutely. I think combat jiu-jitsu, the only problem I have with combat jiu-jitsu, first off, I think it's just how jiu-jitsu should be trained. We don't call it combat jiu-jitsu, we call it strike-based jiu-jitsu because like you said, I'm heavily influenced from who I consider my instructor now, even though I met him after my black belt, Javier Vasquez. If you go to Javi Vasquez's academy, you can slap the whole time. You can strike, and that's just a normal part of jiu-jitsu. And that changes a lot of people's jiu-jitsu. My biggest gripe with combat jiu-jitsu is that right now, if you want to have a combat jiu-jitsu match, you have to be doing it at a professional level, basically. They're going to put it at an MMA event. I want my white belts to have combat jiu-jitsu matches. I want my blue belts to have combat jiu-jitsu matches. The same way they can have an amateur boxing match where you have someone of similar skill matched up. I only pause so that no athletic commissions will throw them under the bus. But I actually, at different academies, have had some of my lower students and other lower students match up, and we've had combat jiu-jitsu matches.
Smokers.
Some might call them that. We officially deem them sparring exhibitions.
So now Ed is a huge fan of Keenan Cornelius and the lapel guard.
I actually think Keenan's one of the brightest minds in jiu-jitsu.
Exactly.
However, Keenan has a path where he develops a great amount of creativity, and I, try to stay in tune with his no-gi stuff. The thing I don't like about kind of the modern jiu-jitsu is that it is so heavily uniform specific. The thing I like about jiu-jitsu is it's like, hey, this is going to work regardless of what you're wearing, regardless of what you bring. All you got to bring is 2 arms, 2 legs, and a neck, and I can get you. I actually would prefer... I don't like training exclusively no-gi, although that's kind of what I've been known for and kind of, what I excel at, because I don't think that's realistic for everyday life, in that right now you're wearing jeans. Now, but you're wearing jeans, you're not wearing gi pants, you're not wearing a heavy coat. I would like to see a uniform that more closely resembles actually the Taekwondo uniform, where they just have a little V cut in it. It's form-fitting. It's thin. Because I actually have tried to grapple people wearing coats. It's nothing like a gi. It's absolutely nothing like it. Okay, shirts are thinner. They're more closely knit. Also, like if you look at a Sambo Kurtka, where the belt is woven into the kimono and you can't stretch the jacket through the legs. I want to be good at grappling a person. I don't want to be good at grappling a piece of clothing. Now, why isn't just no-gi training? Because if I have a coat and someone grabs my coat, I should be able to react to that. There's going to be friction there, if nothing else. I look at the gi as a training tool, not a tool for competition, not something where we're specifically going to develop the techniques around the clothing.
Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. So points you were reiterating about being a martial artist, well-rounded. Jamie Cruz touched on a lot of the same points, and I completely agree with you. Being well-rounded and testing yourself and stand-up, being a wrestler you've talked about, and strike, all of it. One of the things that we're trying to do here is to spread the knowledge of jiu-jitsu. I think jiu-jitsu hasn't reached the full amount of people yet. There's millions more that know about it than when you started training. Even when we started training, it's grown exponentially. And we want to help continue the growth. And I think competition is one of the ways you can get more eyes on the sport, and if it's exciting and stuff like that. Obviously, jiu-jitsu has kind of hit a point where it's starting to get silly with double guard pulls and stuff like that. But as you've mentioned in a past interview, is the difference between jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, sambo, is the rule set. The rule set changes it and puts it in you in that tight little box for how you're going to actually compete, and it does push technique forward. The reason lapel guard exists is because of the way the competition is structured now. Is there rule sets in just jiu-jitsu itself that you would try to promote just for sport jiu-jitsu to help push the sport forward?
I know the answer.
Well, I think that a point system is important, but I think that a point system should reflect the reality of combat. And something that drives me nuts is that we are using a point system that came out before we had 20 years of mixed martial arts to watch and to see evolve. A simple example is this. Why am I awarded the most points for back with hooks? Because that is deemed to be the most valuable position for a real fight if punches were involved. If you watch the turtle position, I can end a fight very, very easily in the turtle. Go watch George St. Pierre fighting Matt Serra. Tell me he would have been better served to put the hooks in. Absolutely not. He had Serra defenseless, striking him from that position. Watch Brock Lesnar versus Heath Herring. Actually, if you watch Heath Herring,
Oh, that's painful.
I teach an escape from the back. We call it the Heath Herring escape. Pretty much where you baseball back grip the arm, you pass it over, you spin into the guard. Heath Herring would give up his back against so many great fighters, so many great jiu-jitsu guys, and always escape. Brock Lesnar fought. He just held referee's position the whole time and brutalized him. Literally, I pretty much ended Heath Herring's career. I think that should be a position that we see the value in, we reward it, and we look for it in training. So here's how I think the point system of jiu-jitsu has disincentivized good combat strategy. If you are close to, say, knee cutting past my guard, rather than accepting the pass, I turtle. Because as long as I can stop your feet from going in my thighs, I'm good. What do I do when I turtle? I ball up and I expose the back of my head. I expose myself to knees to the face. I expose myself to the worst attacks. My spine is completely vulnerable. If I'm in bottom side, you might hold me. And yes, I might have to worry about some attacks from one hand, but I could defend myself. If you told me you're going to fight to the death and you have to fight someone bigger and stronger than you, and you get to pick the starting positions, you can pick bottom side or you can pick the bottom of turtle. I'm going to pick the bottom of the side every time. But because of this artificial point system, which no longer incentivizes things that are the best for striking, or when strikes are involved, I think you're creating bad patterns and bad habits. Another thing is like the damage that can be done within the guard. Being on your back in the guard, now you've created a situation where as long as I'm on top in a guard, I cannot score points. So there's no incentive unless I know I can pass. And look at ADCC. How many matches are 0-0? It is far too hard to score points. If I am in your guard and I can trap your arm behind your back and hold it there, I could beat you senseless. Therefore, achieving, even without strikes, if I can, from a closed guard, take your arm, pin it behind your back and hold it there for, demonstrate control the same way you might demonstrate control from mount, that should be points. If I get side control is worth whatever points it's worth, but for me to improve, I have to get to a knee on belly. Okay, well, let me ask you this. If you're in a real fight, would you rather be on knee on belly, or would you rather have a side mount crucifix with both arms pinned down? Which is where BJ Penn the first jiu-jitsu world champion. That's non-Brazilian. He gets put there against Matt Hughes. He's completely defenseless. His jiu-jitsu is worthless. That's a devastating position. That is the strongest position, in my opinion, in all of mixed martial arts, the sidebound crucifix. We don't reward that position with points in jiu-jitsu. Why? Why shouldn't we have 100 different ways to get into that position and hold it? If I have someone that I'm confronted with in a street situation, if I have a choice between I could go to the mount or I could go to the sidebound crucifix, I'll pick the sidebound crucifix every time. I mean, it's even to the point of, think of the back. We have EBI, where we literally, make the back the starting position. Say you can use any control. I'll ask you, what's the first thing someone does when they get the back in EBI?
Body triangle.
Body triangle. Immediately. Body triangle is not rewarded points by the IBJJF, and they refuse to change it. Why? Because, X amount of years ago, insert Gracie name here, didn't realize that. Jiu-jitsu was the art of progress, and that's what I liked. And I feel like the rule system and the point system specifically is very stunted.
I think we have a part to play in the rules changing. Like you're saying, that's the turtle. I never even thought about it that way. From the striking perspective, of course, it makes absolute sense. And if they allowed knees to the head on the ground, GSP would finish every fight he ever did because he always controlled guys very well. You're just not allowed to knee the head for protection.
So since you are a big fan, you obviously know that we have a whole point system. Ed really had a lot to do with the thinking. There's one position I like, but what are your thoughts on Ed's point system? The back, if you get one hook, it's 2 points. You get the second hook, you get your second 2 points. So you accumulate 4 points. You don't need both hooks in order to get 4 points.
Oh, I don't even think you should need any hooks. I think if you just control referee's
he's taking
position.
it to another level.
I even think a front headlock. If I can snap you down to a front headlock and I can control, it's just like anything else. If I can get a front headlock for a second, that's enough. But if I can get a front headlock and control you and keep you there, you're in a lot of trouble. You talked about, I trained some people who fight in Japan. In Japan, you can knee the head.
Yeah.
And it's like that changes everything. Then it's like, oh, we were actually training when we passed to let the person come up, give them space. Why? Because they're going to come into a front headlock. What happens when you're in a front headlock? Oh, that's a fight-ending position now. We can just stomp and knee you to the head the whole time. So I think the front headlock, if I can sprawl you out there and hold you and keep your 2 hands on the ground, that should be points.
I think you like this then. How about crucifix from the back? Does that deserve points?
Oh, absolutely. If I trap
He's
an
the
arm,
only person that said.
if I trap an arm, absolutely. No, absolutely. It's
Here we go.
Somebody gave us 1 point for that.
It's control that leads to submission. It's like wrestling. What's the most points you can accumulate in wrestling? A near fall. Why? Because you almost pin the person. Pinning is what you ultimately want. Well, what are the ultimate things? You want ultimate control. You want ultimate submission. If I've moved up a ladder, it's just like, well, why do I get points for knee on belly? It's halfway between side control and mount. Yeah, if I can trap your arm, I think if I can trap your arm, like I said, from closed guard, if I can trap your arm, that's a point.
You're starting to sell me on it now.
Yeah.
I know you're going to like these rules because you already like those rules. If I sit and pull guard, you get points.
Absolutely.
There we go.
No, the fact there are 2 major problems, and this is why wrestlers become better fighters than jiu-jitsu guys. There are 3 skills that wrestling incentivizes like crazy that jiu-jitsu either doesn't incentivize or disincentivize. Number 1, being on top. It is obvious. The fact that jiu-jitsu has gone so far down that I have to explain to someone why being on top is superior. It's like I have to explain to them what gravity is. We're close to Newton, New Jersey. People should understand what gravity is. The second thing, escaping from bottom. When I am on bottom, if a wrestler, good luck holding a wrestler down. Take a jiu-jitsu artist, give them a good position. Good luck holding a wrestler down. Why? Because when I get taken down, you get 2 points for taking me down. If I can work back to my feet in folk style wrestling, I get my escape point. In fact, when wrestlers are given the choice, and I didn't understand this at first because I learned wrestling after I started jiu-jitsu. I used to watch wrestling matches, and whenever it was top or bottom, everyone picked bottom. I was like, why would you ever pick bottom? Because they had the skills to stand up, they get their escape point. So wrestling incentivizes being on top, wrestling incentivizes getting off the bottom, and wrestling incentivizes pinning, which if you take someone down, keeping them down.
Dave knows all about being pinned.
Listen, when we talked about this the last time, that's not what we're talking about right now, Ed. All right? Ed thinks that when someone's training jiu-jitsu, which I partially agree with, that they should just accept bottom position and play from there. There is a point to playing from bottom position, but I enjoy when I roll with, it usually happens with an MMA fighter, they want to get up. I like having to include in my techniques being able to keep them on the ground because an MMA fighter is really good at getting off the ground.
Well, here's something. You want to watch someone's head explode? Do this. And I won't throw the academies under the bus, but this very high level academy I was at, and you're training, and I have maybe the person swept me. I have closed guard. They open my guard. They stand up. So I stood up, and they looked at me like, the hell, this guy's lost his mind. They gave the sideways glance, the shoulder shrug, like, can you believe this guy? And then they sat down.
2 points.
Yeah, well, they think it's ridiculous. It's funny because I'm training someone in my basement as a result of the closures, but I'm teaching him private lessons. I'm having him start on the ground for the sake of safety right now because they didn't learn how to fall yet. And so I'll say to his partner, like, hey, just keep things on the ground. But the idea of not standing up to pass is foreign. So he stands up to pass. So the other guy stands up and they're like, whoa, what's this? And I'm like, it's so weird and artificial to explain to someone, well, we don't stand up. Unless we're passing guard, then you can stand up. But don't you stand up.
I like the goal of having to keep someone down because especially, let's talk about MMA for a second. That guy wants to get up. Let's talk about a street fight. You think somebody's just going to stay on the ground? No, they're going to get up, whether to run away or to attack. So if you have to keep them there, I feel like that's an added skill.
Let me jump in here.
Ed gets angry. Somebody stands up. Don't stand up.
Listen to me.
I'm cutting you off. Happy birthday.
So I don't wrestle at all. I'm terrible at wrestling. I've always sat, so my sweeps have gotten stronger, obviously, than my wrestling. There is a time and place for both, I believe, and I do believe I should be a well-rounded jiu-jitsu player, and wrestling should be involved. What happens is when you're teaching white, blue belts, and
from all your teaching, continue.
Listen, especially from an athletic perspective, people that can get up and use their athleticism, they can cheat. So I think it's a way to limit it. I'm not saying every time. I'm saying in some places, like you just said, don't stand this time. Just work on your sweeps. So you're only working sweeps. So it's like working from side mount. All right, you're going to work on top, and then you work on bottom. We're working a specific thing. But overall, yeah, you should be able to hold somebody down. I definitely agree with that. But what do you think about specific times where you should really just be working on sweeps only or other, specific things only?
Yeah, and it might sound like I'm just super pro wrestling. One thing that drives me nuts, there's a wrestler a guy I know that was on a national team for wrestling that was phenomenal, and he refuses to do jiu-jitsu. And it's like, I'll watch him in a class where it's like, okay, pass or sweep or submit. And his sweep is he just lets you pass, then he powers up to his feet and double legs you. And it's like, okay, it's extremely impressive how he's able to get up, but it's like you're not developing a new skill here. But I think it's like anything else. It's like absolutely you have to develop your guard game. Absolutely you have to be prepared if someone throws you down, and I'm not acting like I'm Dan Gable and I can take everyone down, but I at least attempt to. But it needs to be a part of the game that's trained and given equal weight, meaning if you have 5 ways to pass the guard, you should have 5 ways to take someone down. If you have 5 ways of securing top side, you should have 5 ways of securing someone after a takedown. From a tournament perspective, one thing that bothers me, especially when you talk about beginners, is this. I feel like a few things happen in jiu-jitsu tournaments that frustrate me, and sometimes it might almost sound like I'm making an excuse for why one of my white belts or blue belts might lose. But here's what happens. Say you take a white belt, and in a broad sense, let's just call jiu-jitsu being on top, being on bottom, being on your feet. If someone comes into my school and they spend a third of their time being on bottom, a third of their time being on top, and a third of the time being on their feet, and then they face someone else who spends no time on their feet, they essentially have 30% more time being on bottom. Let's say they spend 2/3 of their time being on bottom, 1/3 of their time being on top. Okay, then the match begins. They get to avoid the takedown completely by sitting down to a spot where they have twice the amount of training over one of my students. Now, it's just like anything else. It's like learning a foreign language. In the long term, my student can catch up. But if someone's learning, English and Japanese at the same time, you give them you make the test just Japanese, they're going to lose to someone that's learning just Japanese. If they're going to sit down and concede the takedown, then I do think that they need to at least reward that with points.
I think this ties into something I want to touch with you is it's hard to go through that. Like knowing all those things, right? Being the student and then you lose to that person. It's like, ugh, why don't I just do what they do? And I wanted you to talk about ego in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus self-esteem in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think people might get this a little confused, and it does affect the way you learn and move forward if you let one take over the other.
And Ed asked about this specifically because he has a huge ego when it comes to jiu-jitsu and he can't get past it, which might be the thing that's holding him back the most.
Maybe. It could be.
It's hard because with jiu-jitsu, it's almost like you're playing a video game. If you have a particular character that has a particular move that you can implement and you just train that one move, you can beat the game without actually becoming any good at the game. So with jiu-jitsu, you have to kind of, there are guys, and I have students like this, that will kind of almost violate the agreement, which is, hey, when you first come in, like I said, I'm teaching someone that's brand new. So I've taught them, hey, this is a single leg takedown. This is one guard pass. This is side control. This is mount. This is back. This is how to connect them. And this is, then we take one submission. Okay, an arm bar. We're going to do an arm bar from guard, from mount, from side, from back. Now, let's say you take another person. You're like, this is a foot lock, or this is a guillotine, or we're just going to teach you guillotines. The guy who only knows a guillotine is going to tap this guy out for a prolonged period of time because, well, anytime he comes in, he only knows how to do single legs and double legs. I'm just going to guillotine him every time. Anytime he goes for his pass, I'm just going to set up this guillotine. So I can kind of game the system by using this one thing. I'm not going to get better, but I'm going to tap people out, and that's going to make me feel better. It's almost like when someone learns an Americana and they start Americanaing people from top guard. That will work. No, if you get someone that has a good Americana and you teach them kind of what we ultimately know is not good jiu-jitsu, but we teach them this, they'll tap everyone out. And you have to be able to explain to the person that for your long-term success, you have to not win now to win later. This is not going to work. This is going to have a low ceiling. So it's kind of like that with anything else. You have to be able to get people to a point where you say, like I said, like, okay, right now you are going to, at a lower level, you're going to lose to someone that's exclusively training guard because you are also training takedowns. But at the higher level, once you catch your guard up to theirs, you will have this whole other field. Once you can pass their guard, if they can pass your guard, you can kick away, stand up, take them down. They don't have that ability. This is going to be something that's going to be for your long-term ability. And that's kind of, everyone talks about like what makes the best student. And in my opinion, the thing that's not talked about enough is trust. That's what I want to look for. If you give me a student, I don't want to see who's the strongest. I don't want to see who learns the fastest. I don't want to see who's the most creative. I just want to see who trusts, because the person that trusts me is just going to follow the recipe.
So this is kind of an expansion to that saying, don't fear someone that knows 10,000 techniques, fear someone that trains one technique 10,000 times. You want everyone to do those reps, but you want them to do them in the reps that cover more techniques. Is that right?
I want them to develop a full arsenal of jiu-jitsu. It's like Ryan Hall talked about when he faced Gordo at Abu Dhabi. I think it was like an alternate match, and he freaking broke Gordo's leg. And he's like, there's no way that I had better overall jiu-jitsu than him, but I had a heel hook. He didn't have a heel hook. I knew kind of the law of comparative advantage, so I was just able to throw this at them. And from a competitive standpoint, that can make sense. But when you're talking about learning, it's hard for people sometimes to step out of their... it's like, you ever watch a little kid play a video game and like you get the special move? Like if you're playing X-Men, you hit this, you get 3 Berserker Barrages. You want to save it for when you're fighting Magneto, but everyone they push, Berserker Barrage, Berserker Barrage, Berserker Barrage, because they can't resist the feeling of winning that they get every time they use that. That's what a lot of these guys do with these techniques. They're like, I'm just going to use it right away, use it right away, use it right away, rather than following the path of, hey, you have to go like this. I'm actually, like, just as a simple example, earlier in the day, I'm learning classical guitar, and my guitar teacher is angry at me because I'm playing a higher level piece, and he's like, stop, because you kind of have to gooseneck your wrist when you play classical guitar, and I'm not, because I came from electric guitar where you have your wrist locked. I always lock my wrist, and he's like, you're getting away with that now. That's going to hamper you long term. He actually like tied like an old school eraser to my wrist because I can't keep my wrist flat to play. I have to go like that, and he's having me play like Mary Had a Little Lamb now. But it's because I have to take that step backward, because he knows I'm essentially, and this, anytime I'm breaking the rules with this, I always relate things back to jiu-jitsu. This is one of the ways jiu-jitsu's helped me in my normal life. I'm like, this is like the person that's doing the Americana from the top of guard. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to learn this the right way. Like, I took a lesson on climbing. There's an indoor rock wall, and I was with my friend, and there was this guy, and he's like watching us climb, and we were fit and strong, so we're climbing up the wall. We're going pretty fast, and he's like, you guys are only climbing with your upper body. Climbing's actually mostly a lower body thing. And he's showing, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I start trying to learn it, and my friend's just racing up the wall. He goes, you dumbass, look how much faster I can get up. And I said to him, I was like, bro, you're just like the guy that's Americanaing from the top of guard. You're tapping out the white belt and thinking you're good. This guy's actually good. I'm going to listen to him. And he does jiu-jitsu also. He goes, oh God, you're right. And so then he started climbing with his lower body.
So I want to go back to the trust. That's a big insight, because you know how it is, especially when you come up all the way to the ranks. You've been tapped 10,000 times, and it sucks sometimes to get tapped, especially by somebody you think. You start letting the ego in this way, like you think I'm better than that guy, but he's tapping me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and lose, or I'm going to play his game and I'm going to win. Is there a way you can instill that in your students, like to teach them to trust more, or is it innate? Like, how do you get through to somebody that's not at the highest trust level that you think they should be?
I mean, the way you get through it is you essentially have to have someone, and this is hard when you first start, but you have to have someone that has followed the path with trust and succeeded. So, like, I think the John Danaher phenomenon is very interesting, because John Danaher, I always knew him as, not that I had this long personal relationship with him, but through training in the tri-state area, people that train with him, and everyone would talk about New Zealand John. That was what he was known as. And he used to actually, the first class I believe he taught at Henzo's, I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I have this right, was actually a class on how to do bouncing. Like when he first started, he was a bouncer and he would teach a bouncing class. And he had his methods, and they were different. And there were some people that trained with him and some people that didn't like him. And there were like cliques that formed. But what happened was, now everyone follows the Danaher method. I follow the stinking Danaher method because I've got all of his DVDs. Now, why does everyone follow the Danaher method? Everyone follows the Danaher method because first it was, Gary, then Eddie, but now it's Gordon. Because they see what happened to the guy. And when you ask Gordon, what did you do? He goes, I just listened to what this guy said. Listen to what this guy says, and you will get what I got. So for someone to trust you, they have to see that it works. Okay, it's just like, why do we all train jiu-jitsu? Because Royce Gracie showed that it worked. So you have to essentially find a student, get them to trust you, get them to be successful, at least successful enough that they can tap everyone out in the room, and get them to reiterate, listen to coach, listen to this, follow the system, and then everyone will fall in line.
For sure. Absolutely. So
No one trusts you, though, Ed.
I don't need them to. I don't own a school like you do, dunce.
But you're there helping me. And as soon as you leave, everybody says, I don't trust Ed.
They never say that. So you've had the jiu-jitsu side, the MMA side as a competitor. When you've made the switch over to coach, how has that been different for you?
Well, I kind of was doing everything at the same time. I started jiu-jitsu in 99, and then I feel like I am the child of a single mother, and I've had stepfathers come in, and every time I think they're going to stay and be the one to lead me, but they just keep leaving. So I went through a lot of different instructors. So I started in Poughkeepsie under this guy. He actually runs a New Jersey federation now, Fernando Sarmento, but he's better known as Cabeza. And so he was my instructor from like the end of 99 up till about, when did I go to college? Like 2002, right before 2003. So I trained with him for about 3 years. And then he and the school owner had a falling out. He left. Then they brought a new Brazilian in, Marco de Lima, and I trained with him for, actually Marco is the first coach of UFC superstar Glover Teixeira. I've actually known Glover since he first started. I can say that I used to tap a white belt Glover out for like a week before he just, through osmosis, learned all the jiu-jitsu in the world and would kill me. But I trained with Marco for a while, and then what happened was I was kind of hitting a plateau, and I started training with this other guy, these two gentlemen in Thornwood, New York, Rob Kahn and Steve Cardian. Then the school owner didn't like that, and so he kicked me out. He has since left jiu-jitsu and is now a Christian rock singer in Florida.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But anyway, then I was training with Rob and Steve, and very closely with Rob. And then Rob, about a year and a half into training with him, moved out to Tampa. So it's like I would constantly have these instructors coming and going. And then at a certain point, I just decided, well, I needed consistent training, and if I couldn't find it for myself, I would just go get it on my own. And so I started teaching in 2000 and right about 2005 is when I started teaching. So the whole time that I was competing, my entire professional career, I was teaching the same time. I just, I'd say I wasn't very good at it, but I almost think no one was very good at it. In like the way jiu-jitsu is taught now, the speed at which people learn, how things are organized, systemized, like the word curriculum never was in anyone's vernacular. Drilling wasn't a thing. Like, it sounds silly, like when they're like, oh, what's the biggest difference between jiu-jitsu now and then? It's like, we used to just go and roll and try to figure things out. There was no structure. Like, that's just having something like how you would learn a class. I mean, it was even from one day to the next. You would learn like an armbar from guard one day, and then you would learn like a back mount escape the next day, and then you would learn an Americana from mount. Like, there was no cohesion. But anyway, so I didn't really transition out of one and into the other. I was kind of even before I had my own school, I was always being the guy that people would pawn the kids' classes off onto. I would be someone that would be like, hey, you could teach this guy a private lesson if you help me with a private lesson. So I was teaching from pretty much with blue belt, up into where I am today. So I was doing both at the same time.
So you said that you were bouncing around kind of teachers. Did you ever settle into a mentor? Because we talk a lot about mentors on this podcast. Or did you just kind of pull from everywhere and kind of make it your own?
Well, I have a lot of instructors who've taught me a lot. When you say mentor, just what that's kind of conjures up in my head is someone that's kind of leading you by an example on how you should be carrying yourself kind of in life. And I've had a lot of great people who help teach me a lot of great things. I just have a very different outlook on how I view things and how I view the world. I'm a little bit of a contrarian anyway, versus how they did. So I wouldn't necessarily say I had mentors. Like, I've had people that showed me great technique, though. If I was to say that there's anyone whose philosophy of jiu-jitsu I believe in most closely, someone whose game I mirror myself after the most, it's 100% Javier Vasquez. But I met Javi after I was already a black belt. And that's kind of similar. Javi actually married Rose Gracie. They've since gone their separate ways, but he started training with her brothers, Huron and Henner, after black belt, and that really shaped his game. So I would say if you're asking me who my jiu-jitsu mentor is, I would say it's Javier Vasquez. And I know if any of my past instructors hear this, they might take offense to that because they're like, hey, I knew you for years before that, and I showed you so much, I sacrificed so much, and they're right, and I appreciate that. Javi, just the way he thinks of jiu-jitsu, the way I think of jiu-jitsu, even though, he's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, and unfortunately we only get to see each other so often, that's really where I think the cohesion is. When I think of mentors, when I think of people that kind of showed me how I should behave in the art and people who I tried to model myself after, they actually more often than not weren't my instructors. They were people that were going up the ranks with me, or believe it or not, a lot of them were my students. Like, I learned a lot of things about life and about how you should approach the art and about how you should, treat people and dedicate yourself. I learned more of that from my students and from kind of my fellow classmates than I would say I learned that from instructors.
It's a very different perspective than somebody like me. I've only been with Yanni. So all I know is the way Yanni teaches, and I'm lucky enough he knows what he's doing. That's more luck than you have searched it out, and you're willing to take techniques and learn things from people that are technically worse than you, but it doesn't matter. It's not about being worse or better. You'll just, if it's something that makes sense or clicks with you, it seems like you'll just pick it up and take it without a second thought.
Well, I mean, when we say the word worse, and this kind of comes...
It's like a judgment. It's a
judgment.
No.
No. But this kind of... I understand what you're saying, but this kind of comes from how people view jiu-jitsu. And I was actually just having this same conversation with my guitar teacher, because he'll always ask me questions about martial arts. And it's like, people think, well, and it's not that there's no truth to this. How do we know who's better at jiu-jitsu? Like, you guys are attempting to settle amongst yourselves.
Oh, we're going to settle it.
Yeah. But it's...
Will you help me?
Yeah.
We can get back to this. Go ahead, finish your thought.
It's we roll, and whoever taps out is better, and whoever submits the other person is better, and the other person is inferior. And that shows that this is a better person. And there is some truth to that. However, there's so much to physicality and things like that there's a lot of people that I could tap out. And then after I tap them out, they could show me a way to improve something that I'm doing. And a lot of people don't want to recognize this in jiu-jitsu, that there's a couple of things at play. The first thing is I have a little bit of a different style of game. My game is actually kind of old. Actually, you mentioned when Yanni rolls with me, he says sometimes he gets nostalgic because of some of the old school techniques that I'll throw out there. But as a result, actually, I have an advantage over a lot of people because just as an example, I like passing from my knees. Almost nobody does that. Not that I can't pass from my feet. I just like passing from my knees and being heavy. And even if we say that passing from your feet is more advantageous, just the fact that people don't see it every day, I do very well with that. It's kind of like if you think about southpaw and orthodox. Most people can't fight southpaw. So sometimes it's in your favor to box as a southpaw even if you're not as good. So what I'm saying is maybe I can get the better of someone. Maybe I can tap someone out because I have a bit more of a unique game, a game they didn't see. But that doesn't mean that they can't help me, and that doesn't mean that I'm better than them. Or it's physicality, and that's something people don't talk about. I've got this kid right now. He's from the Czech Republic. His name's Elion, and he is going to be technical one day. Right now is not that day. But he's so powerful. He will just go there. Like I had a visiting brown belt, very technical brown belt, and he had this brown belt sweating at certain points just with his physicality. You know, like he'll look at the guard and it's like you or I might say, okay, well, I'm going to try to go maybe with a Toriando here, and then I could go into like an X pass. And he'll just be like, I'm going to leap in the air, do a backflip, and land on the guy's back, kind of like Nicky Rodriguez. Now he can, so what my point is that he could potentially tap some people out and have a huge gap in technical proficiency and knowledge. So like I learned from a lot of people who, quite honestly, if it was like, hey, you're fighting to the death, hey, listen, my hand's getting raised and your hand isn't. But that doesn't mean I don't have something to show them. Like a simple example, like I help coach a lot of MMA fighters. A lot of these guys, they're 21 years old. They're working out 3 times a day. I'm 36 years old and I'm working out 1 time a day. They're going to get the better of me when we train. But, they still respect the fact that, hey, there's something to be learned from this guy. There's something that they can still show me. So I wouldn't say that. So for example, like I've got a pretty good north-south choke. I'm not learning from anyone who doesn't have a north-south choke as good as mine or that doesn't have a detail that I don't know. So I wouldn't say I learn from anyone worse than me. I would just say that I learn from people who maybe I have an ability to tap out at times.
For sure. And a lot of the people we've talked to, there's just the thread continues to go on is the humility to say something like, you're a black belt. Usually that's the pinnacle. It's never ending, right? It's just you keep learning and learning and learning. I think some people will settle. They're satisfied with, I can tap this guy with this move over and over again. That's my move, and I'm better than you.
Isn't that what you do, Ed?
Absolutely not.
I'm pretty sure I felt that scarf choke.
No,
I don't know how many times.
For sure, I hate myself.
Oh, all right.
But I like to win.
No, just leave on that.
I let my ego get the better of me, and I can't lose to you. So I will, I'll dominate you the same time.
You
over
will
and over.
lose to me again and again.
All right, let's talk about this. So, Brian, Yanni has said that he would need a 6-week professional training camp with Dave to train 3 times a day for him to beat me.
He didn't say 3. He said multiple times a day.
Multiple times a day for 6 weeks, which Dave obviously can't do. Do you think you could help Dave to beat me if you had to? Like if your life was on the line?
We're talking about one of Yanni's students now, all right? But I will tell you, Ed will pass from his knees because he's going to force half guard or force over under or put me in butterfly guard.
Yep.
Well, what I would say is this, and it's actually funny because you mentioned Keenan, and Keenan was talking about how he does this. And I'm like, oh, this is something, I'm sure a lot of people do this, but it's something I've always done too. I have for people that I've trained with a lot, I have techniques specific for them. Like I have moves that if I'm going to roll with Yanni, I'm like, okay, this is how I avoid his. So like a simple thing, Yanni used to constantly abuse me with his double overhook butterfly guard sweep. So I developed a whole game around avoiding the double overhook butterfly sweep, and then there's just certain moves I knew. So I actually think I could coach, because I've rolled with both of you enough, I think I could coach the other one to just hit one specific move against the other that I actually think would be very effective.
So interesting, though, is we've only trained Nogi.
I've only, that's because anytime I leave my academy, I never bring my stupid gi with me.
So I'm loving lapel guard. Ed's shutting it down for now, and I do have some things that I can do to Ed where he's in a lot of trouble. But as long as he pulls guard, I've been finding out the best way to beat Ed is using his own stuff against him. And I use it the exact way he's taught it.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
If you guys are training, I was going to tell you to do a knee reaping footlock to Ed. So if you guys are going to be doing a IBJJF gi match, I'll just see myself out.
He says I'm allowed to leg lock him. I can heel hook him in the gi. He doesn't care.
He won't be able to touch these feet.
Now, his feet are only a size 7. Do you think that that's heel hookable? Heel hookable? Is that a word?
He's a man wearing Crocs and socks. So he's got an extreme amount of confidence in his feet. So I think you've got an uphill battle right there.
Well, it's definitely an uphill battle, especially if he's on his back because his belly is so big. It's going to be like climbing a hill.
He just likes to poke me.
I
He
do.
he knows
I'm
what's gonna
trying.
happen.
I'm trying to incentivize him to lose weight and to better himself.
When this quarantine started, I remember I took a picture of the scale.
I saw
and I
it.
was like, it was 171 pounds. And I was like, I'm going to be like 165 when this thing ends. I was right about the 5, but I am 185 now. And so I can't fat shame anybody. It's disgusting what I've done to myself. Now that I have all of the time in the world to plan my meals and to work out, I've decided to let my body degenerate completely. So if anyone else is fat, I won't be the one that cast the first stone.
Well, I'll do it then.
You love throwing, so this is what I was talking about. I'm trying to take the judgments out of it, and you're throwing them right back.
My
in.
judgments are only at you. Have I said anything negative to anyone else?
It's not going to make your jiu-jitsu any better.
That's
Anyways,
okay.
I'd like to let the listeners know that, yes, we have trained together, and Brian is a savage. You came here one day and trained, and you were rolling with, it was just, Yanni was the highest rank in the room, the rest were lower belts, and you were going hard every round. You went so hard that you went in the bathroom and threw up. That's how hard you went. That is so impressive to me that you just push yourself when you don't have to. You don't have to push yourself that hard. There's no reason to push yourself that hard unless you want to get better every day, which is what you're trying to do.
Well, there's a few things. First, when because I can remember when I was a younger student, when I was like a blue belt, and I mean, like, you talk about how different things are. Now it's like, ooh, a new black belt's in the room. If there was a purple belt in the room when I started, it was a big deal, and a lot of times there were two types of people that would come in. There were the types of people that were higher belts that were friends with one of my instructors, and they would come in, and those people would only train with the other higher belts. And you would just feel like so left out. And then there were the guys that would come in and they would train with absolutely everybody. And win, lose, draw, whatever, I was like, man, those guys are so cool. I can very clearly remember, rest in peace, Dave Jacobs came, and he was like a high ranked brown belt while I was still a blue belt. And he came to school and he rolled with absolutely everybody till he was ready to die. And he got tapped and whatever at different points because he could barely stand up. And he was a small guy. But he rolled with everybody. And I was like, I went home being like, man, this was awesome. I got to, plus he had a different style of jiu-jitsu. And I was like, if I ever go to one of my friends' schools when I'm an older guy, or when I'm a higher belt, assuming that the people aren't crazy and I'm not injured, I'm going to do that. So whenever I come to up top, I try to make sure everyone gets a roll in with me. And then the other thing is just there's like the time where I have when I'm in my gym, I train, but it's not like my time. It's my students' time. So when it's my time to train, I want to make sure that I'm getting as much out of it as I possibly can. And I think I remember the day that the day in question where I puked. And because this is one of the things that bothers me when people sit rounds out and then want to roll with you. And I remember there was someone, I won't throw them out here, but they sat rounds out, and I had asked them to roll earlier, and they said no. And I rolled with everyone. Then they asked me to go again, and I felt like I was dying, but I was like, I got to go with them just to kind of set the example. And, I definitely can say I put everything I had into that role.
I think you should call them out right now.
No, don't do that. But I have a lot of respect for that, and that definitely left a huge mark on me that day. Like it really makes a big difference when somebody like you is going to do something like that. Because if you're going to push yourself that hard, and you've been in the game 20 plus years, why shouldn't I do the same thing? So this ties into another thing Dave loves to get to me about is the breaks that I take. I take a lot of breaks. I've been with Yanni for 13 years. No black belt in sight. He's right. I shouldn't have it. How do you deal with students that you have that take long breaks? Do you think it's a job of an instructor to motivate as well as to teach, or you think people should be able to motivate themselves?
What I say is this, as an instructor, my life revolves around martial arts. I could talk about martial arts till I'm blue in the face for hours. I could remember when was the last 10-7 round and stuff like that, because it holds such an esteemed place in my life. And one of the harder things to accept as a martial arts school owner, but it is the reality of the situation, is jiu-jitsu is a part of other people's lives. Jiu-jitsu is our life. Like, I know for you, it was being, on a fire department. That's a serious situation. That's something you should be focused on. If I'm stuck in a burning building, I want the person that was dedicated to being a firefighter, not the guy that was necessarily spending all of his time passing the guard. And it's hard as an instructor because we love jiu-jitsu and we love seeing people follow kind of in our footsteps. Someone once told me, when you are a martial arts instructor, you're essentially, when you look at your students, you're looking for yourself. You're looking for that other person that's going to carry that same flame of excitement and intensity that you had so that they can carry on what you get from this. But you have to accept that martial arts has a place in people's lives, and it doesn't have to be everyone's life. And I try to motivate people, but what motivates me isn't necessarily the same as everyone else. What I find is that people are motivated, and maybe I'm mistaken in this, but they're motivated by example. So you said that, the fact that I rolled with everyone might have motivated you. That's something that I got a lot from Yanni. He's almost always one of the oldest guys in the room when I'm doing like one of these, what they call pro training now with these higher ranked guys. And he's the last guy to sit out, even when he's got his heat cranked up and he's got his rash guard on underneath his gi and we're all drowning in sweat. He's always there to roll. I'm like, look, if he's not going to quit, I'm not going to quit. So that's what I try to do with my students, is show that I have not just that I'm going to roll hard, not just that I'm not going to quit, but that I have an excitement for this art, that I care about my students, and hopefully they see that and they're going to stick around. But something else that helped me was kind of just deal with it so that I used to take it really personally when someone would either stop training or start a different activity or, God forbid, go to a different academy. And then what happened was I kind of thought, well, let me look at my life. Is there anything in my life that I start and stop a lot? And it's like, oh yeah, there's a million things. Like, so I said, I take guitar lessons now. I had my first guitar when I was in the 8th grade. I should be Jimi Hendrix. I'm not. Why? Because I would start and I would stop and I would start and I would stop and I would find an excuse and I would, hurt a finger or something, or I would have a jiu-jitsu tournament. I would focus on that. And I had instructors who dedicated their lives to guitar, who saw me and maybe saw some promise, and they would call, and sometimes I would pick up and sometimes I'd be like, hey man, nah, I'm working on guillotines this week, and they don't know what that is and they don't care. But to me, guillotines had a certain more importance, but it's something that I constantly come back to, and for the past year, I've been super dedicated to playing guitar. And, this quarantine, I sometimes worry what it's going to do for my finger picking when I get back into it. But I know that, look, I'm an eternal blue belt in guitar, but it still has a certain thing in my life that gives me some joy and some pleasure. And I keep telling myself I'm going to get dedicated to it and stay dedicated. Hopefully I do. But if I don't, it's not the end of the world. And I have to understand that for some people, that's jiu-jitsu. And they're going to get what they're going to get out of it, and they're going to enjoy it. And basically, I want to just let people know that, hey, I'm here for you when you want to train, and I hope you keep at it. And if you don't train, I hope that, or if you stop training or you go somewhere else, I hope that whatever time you did spend with me is just going to better you.
So to talk about taking breaks, just to expand on it a little bit, in the local community here, you have taken a break from MMA competition, and there are rumors that you are thinking about coming back to MMA competition. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
I don't know if you're the one trying to start that rumor.
No.
No, well, all right, I'll talk.
Calling me out.
So,
you're next on the.
There was a time period where I was thinking about it. I'd say I have a love-hate relationship with competition. I take some pride in the times that I was able to compete and learn some lessons from it. And I like that competition would drive me to push myself harder and, get out of bed earlier, eat a healthier diet and stuff like that. So I in those ways, I like competition, but I don't like competition in that I'm an extremely anxious person. I'm very high strung, and competition amplifies that part of me. And it makes me not always the best person to be around. And when I look back on my career, this is the problem with being a competitive athlete, in my opinion. What you always want is you just want your skills to show, and you want to win or lose based on your merit and your skills. What's frustrating is when you're like, that wasn't me out there. Now, it works in two directions. So I can sit there and look at competitions and events. Like I have a very impressive second place resume. Second place at Brown Belt Pan Ams, second place at the Abu Dhabi Trials, second place at the Grappler's Quest Pro. And that used to frustrate me because I just had a mental block where I would never perform in the gold medal match. But I also have had super fights where I won and people are like, hey, can you show me that exchange you did where you caught Wilson Hayes? And I'm like, I couldn't recreate that if I had 100 lifetimes. I overperformed in that match. And there's a lot of times I can look at, I'd be like, that guy was better than me. Well, why'd I beat him? Because I overperformed. You have to kind of everyone always talks about where they underperform. No one wants to talk about the fact that they overperform, but it's frustrating. I wish I didn't overperform. I wish I didn't underperform. I wish I just performed at the level that I know I'm capable of. My last MMA fight, it's not the win or loss. I lost a fight to this guy, Hane Nazari. A fight I'm most proud of because I'm like, I got to show my heart and I worked on it, got to show technique. I fought this kid and I just had a million excuses as far as injuries and a bad weight cut and stressful things in my personal life. And I not only didn't show my skill, I showed a lack of skill. The fortunate thing is that fight's hard to find. But I was upset about that for a long time, and I did think about having a comeback, and I started doing some tournaments. I would just like appear at New Jersey tournaments, like telling no one that I was there. And then I did a grappling like super fight. I grappled some kid who's also an MMA fighter from Greg Jackson's place up in Canada, and it was like a pay-per-view event or whatever. And all I wanted to do, and I had every intention the whole time I was training MMA, I wanted to have one more fight. But I only wanted to have the fight if I was like, look, my goal in this fight is to just show my skill and to compete at the level I can compete and not let my anxieties overwhelm me and overrun me. And I remember I was about to do that super fight. It was televised. I had to tell people about it. I used to do matches in secret. And so like I had to make my profile picture, the submission only, event. And I went out there and I was like, this is the worst I've ever felt in my life. I never, ever want to feel this way again. I've never felt this bad before. And I was like, no, wait, I have felt this bad. This was my last fight. And so I went out there and I actually won the match. It was a nail biter. I didn't perform well up to my standards though. And I'm like, okay, this is just something that I gotta ask myself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth getting back into competition and competing? Because I know that I could get over it the way I used to get over it because I had these problems before, which is just do a million competitions, do a million smokers, do a million hard sparring sessions and come back in there. And I was thinking about doing that, and then I saw some of, I don't want to throw the fighter's name out there, but he's a fighter that I've known for a long time that's had a storied history in the art, and he's right around my age. And he was speaking, and he was slurring his words, and he was having a hard time getting a thought together. And I showed it to someone. They're like, oh, my God, how old is that guy? I was like, he's a year older than me. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay. So I don't plan on fighting again, but if one day I see they're like need a late notice replacement fight, there's like a 10% chance I jump back in. But no, I'm not training for a comeback or anything like that.
All right, well, it's funny that you were mentioning the anxiety and stuff. I'm sitting next to a person that's dead inside. He doesn't know embarrassment.
What does that mean?
He doesn't know embarrassment. He doesn't know fear. He doesn't know anxiety. I have those things. When I used to play baseball, I used to get nervous, like I felt like I was going to throw up every at-bat. And my dad used to tell me, you got to use that. That's extra energy. It's like adrenaline. You channel that into your hitting. And I feel like I do the same thing for jiu-jitsu. Any jiu-jitsu match I've ever felt, I've always felt like I got to throw up. I got to go to the bathroom. I got to get out of here. But do you think that there's a way that people can channel that anxiety? Because I don't think it ever does go away. For people like me that are anxious, I don't think I'll ever not be anxious, but that they can use that kind of energy to channel it.
I mean, yes, and that's kind of where the overperforming sometimes comes
yeah.
from. It's like you just get so centered on something, so focused on something that you're able to. Also, adrenaline, although it makes like fine motor skills hard, it makes gross motor skills easier. Like that's why when a dog's chasing you, you can run faster than you ever thought you could run. You can jump higher. So it does help you in certain ways. It hurts you in others. But I think it hurts you more than it helps you. So the more you can minimize that, the better. Gary Tonin actually talks about this a lot. It's funny because I think of Gary is significantly younger than me, but he almost has a wisdom that exceeds mine in certain ways. He's actually someone I look to a lot. And he talks about how, if you're the best way to have confidence in competition is to have confidence in your success in competition is to have success in training, And the best way to do that is to just become really good. And to me, a lot of it is exposure. It's like, you guys saw my dog was in here earlier and she's a psychopath. And what I just keep telling myself, we adopted her, 2 months ago. I'm trying to expose her to as many people as I can because I'm like, at a certain point, she can't go nuts 24/7. She has to just be like, this is another day. I'm meeting new people. I meet new people every day. So it's like that. Like if competition is what makes you nervous, like that's what makes me nervous. You just gotta compete all the time. I remember when I was at my best competing, I would look at any opportunity to compete to the point that I did like 3 pro divisions out of the crowd. And I just I didn't even have shorts. I had to borrow them. And it was just, I got into that mindset of compete. Put yourself in the fire. It's funny because you would wish that they would, the situations would cross over. So like I know guys that fight in the UFC and they're so confident to stand out there in their underwear, locked in a cage, fighting someone that's an absolute murderer, and they don't blink. But if I'm like, hey, man, you want to show a technique? I'm doing something for Facebook. They're like, oh, geez. Oh, my gosh. Hi. Hey, guys. And they're tripping over their words, and they're forgetting, their right from their left. It's the same thing if you talk about public speaking or going in front and teaching a seminar. You ever see how nervous Nick Diaz gets for any interview? But he'll fight Anderson Silva and clown him in the middle of a bout. So it's I really think exposure is the thing that's going to help the most with anything else, the whole getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
So I just like to back it up a little bit here and have a tiny bit of fun. You talked about competing when you didn't even have shorts. You also train when you don't even have a rash guard, which is disgraceful. If you have listened to past episodes and you heard me talk about guinea tees, what tank tops, because Ed didn't know what a tank top was, and the armpit in the face yet, Brian, that was you.
Okay, yeah. So a couple things I want to say about that. So first, you talk about how things have changed. From when I started in the 90s, there was no pageantry in jiu-jitsu. All right. There was, I think Krugen's was the only like Brazilian jiu-jitsu specific gi. Otherwise, you just wore a judo gi. I always said, I never wear like fancy gis. And they go, well, why not? I go, because it's sewn by the same poor kid in Pakistan. All right. The whole like, let me wear these exotic spats and everything. It's kind of, I've gone the opposite direction. If you ever saw Mike Tyson when he was fighting in the 80s, everyone would come out with robes. Mike Tyson would come out shirtless, okay? And then they told him he couldn't come out shirtless. He said, give me a towel. He cut a hole in the towel, and he said, there, that's my shirt. Because I'm not here for pageantry. I'm not here to look good. I'm here to train. I'm here to try to choke you and get ready. And what's actually funny is, so my girlfriend trains at Up Top. And, I'm going to forget. I think the guy's name's Eric. So, Eric was talking to her afterwards. And I could see he was tough. Like, so I try to, whenever I see, because sometimes as much as I want to get a roll in with everyone, the class is long, some people got to leave. I saw he was rolling tough. I was like, okay, when you don't know what belt is, when it's no gi, I don't know everybody's, bio. I'm like, that kid's tough. I'm going to get rolling with that kid before he leaves. And I guess he was talking to Marissa later, and she goes, man, your boyfriend is a sleeper. And she goes, what do you mean? He goes, he had like basketball shorts on and like a Target t-shirt. I'm like, I'm gonna kill this clown. and then I guess I caught him a few times because I'm not here for pageantry. And some people, it's almost like back in the day, if you wore like Reebok pumps, you thought you could jump higher, you thought you could run faster. And it's like, think of where our sport comes from. Our sport comes from the favelas of Brazil. Okay, from the dirtiest corners of a third world country is where the best talent arises. So I'm not buying your $200 rash guard. I'm not buying the custom shorts.
That's right, Dave. You're going to smell these armpits.
I just wanted to bring it up because in a past episode, I talked about a tank top and getting an armpit in the face. And a little bit ago, Brian was talking about his north-south
Also,
joke.
good luck armbarring me. Honest to God, that's one of the reasons I like wearing the tank tops is I'm like, good. I now, pretty much you're going to get caught in an arm lock, a leg lock, or a choke. And if I'm trained in sleeveless and I work up a sweat, which to work up a sweat, it takes about 3 deep breaths and 4 jumping jacks for me. I just eliminated 1/3 of the waist. I'm going to get submitted.
I shot up what I thought was a very tight armbar on you one of the last times we trained.
Yeah,
and
not
tight
enough.
Right out.
Yeah.
I bet it wasn't tight at all.
It was beautiful. He complimented me on it afterwards.
Yeah.
But no, I did not
You probably
finish
said,
it.
nice try, loser.
Well, not only that, it's one thing I enjoy. Like I like training no gi, and it's not just my whole hey for the street blah blah blah. It's also I like the speed of it. I like the speed of the transitions.
I hate the speed of it. Yeah.
And I like training quick. I like being I like using that to my advantage. And I'm like, the faster I can make it, the better. That was like when I compete, I want to be hard to hold and hard to grab so I can use my transitions. I can use my speed. When I compete, if I ever have the option, I always compete shirtless. And I was getting ready for MMA. And one of the things people do in MMA, they not only compete shirtless, they shave all their body hair. So you have to get accustomed to that. Both you have to get accustomed to someone being like that when you're trying to control them. So I actually think it makes your game tighter. But also you have to get used to being that slippery. So I actually think there's a lot of value in that type of training that is sometimes lost when people are wearing the maybe, albeit more hygienic and maybe more hospitable, long sleeve rash guards.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, the speed is the exact opposite thing that I like about Nogi. So whenever I was rolling with Brian, I was always thankful that he passes on his knees and pressure passes a lot, because when you go down there and you slow it down, that's the part that I like. And I was always thankful for that. When I would see you with, like, I could just, Greg, for instance, from up top here, when I would see you and him going together and you guys starting on your feet and jumping around and trying wrestling, I was like, that's not going to be me. We're going to slow it down over here.
Well, you talk a lot about, wrestling and that aspect, and you mentioned how for high level it's harder for people to even wrestle. They don't wrestle because it's only high level. How do you go about avoiding injuries when you're teaching wrestling to low level people?
He's a stud. Look at him.
No, he can teach it, but I'm saying, like, how do you avoid, like, wrestling's very, you know how white belts are in the jiu-jitsu already, and there's gis to slow everything down. Once you're taking the gis off and you're telling them to start on the feet, that's when I feel like the most injuries I've seen have happened.
Part of it is just comfort with the techniques and comfort with falling down. That's what it is kids, you can train takedowns right away. Kids never hurt themselves doing takedowns. I have kids wrestling from day one. Number one, they're smaller, but number two, they're just used to falling. So their body doesn't brace in ways. Most people actually hurt themselves when they're falling. They don't know how to base. They don't know how to break fall. So part of it is just spending a long time falling. And then it's like anything else. You put them with people who are better, and you kind of take the fear out of it. And then the next thing is you just have to have a very large academy, and you have to have padded walls, which I didn't always have, and so we didn't always train takedowns. But now that I have that, it makes things a lot safer. And then the next thing you have to do is you have to identify the takedowns that are most dangerous and ban them. So, like, there are certain things. The most dangerous thing that I see people do constantly is standing guillotines. That's where, like, the most spinal injuries happen. Someone will jump a guillotine and the person will land head first. So, like, in my school, if you want to guillotine someone, they have to be on the ground. So if I'm going to guillotine you off of a shot, I say you have to sprawl first so that it's not an uncontrolled motion. The next thing is John Danaher bans this takedown too. And back in the day, I saw someone have a compound fracture. That usually taught from like in the self-defense techniques. Like you have a body lock, you stick your leg out and you fall backwards. Banning the most dangerous techniques, I think really, really helps. It's just like, like you could train leg locks safely, but you're not going to necessarily do flying scissor takedowns, So I think banning when I say banning them, a lot of these techniques are used at higher levels. It's just with white belts or spazzy blue belts or people who even are higher belts who've used them irresponsibly. So I take out the most dangerous techniques. I get people comfortable falling, and I pair them with people who are more advanced, which is pretty much the solution to any potentially dangerous thing.
So now we recently just had a mutual friend of, I assume, all of us on Facebook who had shown some standing guillotines and spine spikes, and I noticed that you actually commented on that. So I kind of want to commend you for that. You may have gotten blasted, but just someone pointing out things like that could potentially prevent injury in the future.
No,
Brown nosing.
I know what you're talking about there, but yeah, that stuff scares me because I've Uriah Faber had someone at his gym become paralyzed from that, and that's the thing that always terrifies me. Like some of these guys, they do situations. One of the everyone says, oh, if you could change anything, what would you change? And it's always, for me, it's like the injuries. And so I've seen so many situations, like I could go on and on about the surgeries that I've had, the broken bones that I've had. And the fortunate thing is every time I hurt myself doing a technique, I break the technique down to see, okay, well, where could this happen? And could this happen to other people? And if it is a problem, I point it out. I'm going to throw Marissa under the bus. She had a problem with her knee. First thing I was telling her, stop rolling. She didn't want to listen to me. But it was with a specific technique. It was a specific rolling back take that I don't teach anymore. And I don't teach it because I tore my LCL doing it, and I saw someone else at my gym tear their meniscus doing it, which is what she had happen. And I was like, I'm telling you, if you have knee problems, not saying ban this move for everyone, but if you have knee problems, don't do this rolling back take. And sure enough, I get a call in the middle of my class that she's in the emergency room. So I leave to go pick her up, and she hurt her knee because she was rolling. And then I'm like, how'd you hurt it? And she's like, it was with that particular technique. But yeah, you know, I'm hypersensitive to situations where I could see catastrophic injury happen.
So now do you adjust that mentality when it comes to competition? Not so much jiu-jitsu competition, because we're all, I mean, no one's really trying to hurt each other, but maybe MMA, because you are the coach of possibly one of the most brutal guillotines ever, that of Dan Miller in the IFL.
Oh, well, first, I can't take credit for any of the Miller's guillotine prowess. They've had that from day one. I actually remember they skipped that whole period in jiu-jitsu where like you suck when you first start. I swear to God, I remember because one of my coaches, they started at a place called Planet Jiu-Jitsu, and my coach was their coach's coach, if that makes sense. And so he brought me in to beat them up one day. Like, oh, Jeff Miller, no relation, was going on and on about these two Miller brothers. Go beat them up. And now I was able to tap them out. They had maybe 6 months of training. They were, you know, Jim was a Division I wrestler. Dan was a standout wrestler for Sparta. But they had maybe 6 months of jiu-jitsu. I have been training jiu-jitsu. I was a good purple belt at this point. I was like getting paid money to do super fights. And like I got the better of them, but I felt like a train ran me over. It was like, oh my God. So they've just always been great at that. But yeah, of course, with someone like Jim and Dan, like they, as much as they have brutal techniques, they know how to use them safely. And they're not trying to kind of like prove how tough they are with them. But for as brutal as they actually are fairly safe with them. Although Dan did almost murder that guy in the IFL. But yeah, you know, when Jim's training, it's like, hey, guillotines are game on, kind of because of the nature of who he's going with. But, you know, at the same time, and that's one of the reasons, because Jim does always pull the trigger, he tries to mainly train with people that are higher level. He's fighting later today, and you know, he actually, we did have to kind of tell him to tone it down a little, because he took out half of his training partners, which was me and one other person. So but in the course of this training, I'm like, Jim, like, you only have so many toys, you can't break too many more of them.
So you were just talking about injuries. You definitely have to be super in tune to your fighters that you train so they don't get hurt. That's very good that you're like very aware of that. Back to anxiety. Do you get the same type of anxiety when you go to coach somebody at a live event, or it's a little different?
I get a lot of anxious energy when I coach someone. I feel bad for them because when I get nervous, it manifests itself in really, really bad jokes. And so these people are just subject to it whether they like it or not. But it's a lot of people are like, oh, it's so much worse when my blah, blah, blah is fighting. Not for me. No, it's worse when I fight. Like, and I don't know if that maybe shows that I don't care as much. But look, like if I'm going to sit there and say like, you know, and it depends on the fighter too. What I mean by that is, so like Jim's fighting and Lindsay's fighting. And just through circumstances, I can't be at either of their fights. So for Jim, Martin Rooney's cornering in my place, and for Lindsay, Sean Santella is cornering in my place. I am not now. I want them to win. They're both very good friends of mine. In addition to being fighters, I'm gonna naturally be nervous watching either one of them fight. But I will not be nearly as nervous watching Jim fight, because Jim's a cowboy. You're gonna wind him up, push him out there, and let's see what happens. He's going to do what he's going to do. And even when I'm cornering, you know, I'm going to be able to make advice, but it's like, it's a suggestion. It's kind of like if you see the speed limit's 65, you're like, all right, well, I'll make sure I'm not going too much more than 80.
To that.
Yeah, we'll go roundabout. I'll take that into consideration, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Whereas when Lindsay fights, I sometimes feel like I'm playing a video game. She's just my character. If I say move to your right, she moves to her right. She does everything that I say. So I get very nervous when she fights. Now with Shorty, it's good because Shorty being Sean Santella, he thinks literally, you know, he's been helping me with her to get her ready because he's around the same size. That's why he's going out there. We will literally say the same thing at the same time as far as instruction. You know, she laughs about it, but he's, you know, one of my students as well. So we think the same. So I'm not nervous about me being absent for the fight because, hey, he's going to be there. He's going to say everything I would have said anyway. But when I know that like, hey, this falls on me because she's going to, whatever success or failure she has, it's going to kind of be based on what I see, then I feel very, very nervous, but still not as nervous as when I would fight. When I would fight, I could barely like walk and chew gum.
So I was witness when you did coach Lindsay for a fight, and I was there with several people, and one of the comments, it didn't just last that night. It lasted for a week or so. Everyone continued to comment on what a fantastic coach you were, and just like you said, how she reacted to every single thing that you said. She won that match, just so everyone knows.
Which fight was that?
Maverick MMA. I don't remember who she fought.
Oh, I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly who that
It's
was.
the trust. She has the trust, right?
No, she does. She 100% does. That's very nice of people to say there. That was a good matchup for us. I remember that night. So, I mean, I don't want to take too much credit for that. Lindsay could have had a lot of things go wrong prior to that, and I think she still would have done very well.
Again, the point was just how she did what you were saying, and everyone felt that the things you were saying were exactly right for the moment.
And I'll say this, that when you have an athlete who listens, it can make a coach look better. And that is something that it's great. It's a little more pressure because, someone told me a good coach always takes more of the blame and less of the credit than they deserve. But, when she loses, unfortunately, that happens from time to time. Like, I do put a lot of that on me. I mean, I'm like, hey, this one's on me. Because you listen, you did what you were supposed to, and you trusted me, and so you do get an extra sense of satisfaction when things go well. But, it adds some pressure too.
Yeah, as far as the losses go, those same exact people pointed that out to me as well.
All right, Brian, we're going to get ready to wrap this up here, but I know that when you came in here, you were talking about your new space that you opened up. Would you want to talk about that a little bit? What you got going on?
Yeah, I run Precision Boxing and Mixed Martial Arts. It's in Poughkeepsie, New York. We are moving one town over to LaGrange, New York. LaGrange is French for the barn, which describes what a bustling metropolis it is. Fortunately, we were able to secure a really big spot, 10,000 square feet, which I am hoping I'll have to take the tape measure out. It just has to be, I don't care if it's a centimeter bigger than pure mixed martial arts. It's the entire reason that I'm doing this. Just because I would get so sick and tired. They had wings at one point. They were like, hey, we're in the West Wing of Pure. And I was like, man, they one-upped me. I can remember when I was smacking around Mikey Maine on prom night. And now they've got this gigantic facility. But no, we're very happy. We're very excited, as I'm sure the whole community is excited to get back to training. And hopefully August 1st, it's opening up. So go to precisionmixedmartialarts.com and give us your money.
Do you take credit card over the phone if somebody wants to just call up and donate some funds?
Absolutely.
And your Venmo is?
Brian W. McLaughlin.
Perfect, because I owe you a little bit of money. See how I did that?
I saw what you're doing. Well, it's fantastic. It's not an accident that you're highly successful in teaching, competing, all these things. And I just want to thank you for sitting down and taking the time with us.
My pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
There you go.
Hey!
We're back.
That was great.
I loved it. I'm always right. Everybody
Not always right, that's for sure.
give me a wrong.
If you think Ed is right or wrong, please send feedback.
No.
Email us to thedeathpodcast@gmail.com or DM, PM, whatever it is, on all of our social media @To The Death Podcast.
What about our sponsor, Core BJJ? You can follow them at corebjjnj.com as well as Core BJJNJ on all social medias. They have been very helpful with all the equipment we have, and they are going to be opening in the near future, so make sure you give them your support. We would love to see you guys on the mats. David?
Thank you. That was amazing. So sponsors, do you hear how well Ed is able to do that?
I'm working so hard.
reach
I'm
out.
working so hard on this. I'm ready.
I had another thought, though, but I lost it now.
It's okay.
It's not okay.
You're going to get it back.
Reviews. People, give us reviews. Google, iTunes. I imagine other podcast platforms also have
You
the
should
ability.
know this better.
Yeah, but I only have an iPhone. I'm a smart person, and I use an iPhone. All right? If you have another phone, there's something wrong with you.
No, don't say that.
I wanted to also just thank my number 1 fan and number 2 fans for listening. Also, I slid into your mom's DMs.
You stop saying this. She knows that you haven't. She talked to me about it.
No,
She's
but
like,
I
can you
wanted
tell
to
him? She said,
say-
can you tell him to stop saying that?
Did she say that?
No, she didn't.
No, she did, because she's waiting, checking her phone
She
over
said that
and
we're
over.
like two bickering housewives together.
Wait, we're both housewives?
Both
Neither
of
of us is the husband?
Nope, we're housewives.
Everyone tells me we're like an old married couple.
Fine. I'm the housewife.
So I guess we're an old lesbian married couple.
That's fine. It's progressive. It's 2020, bro.
2020, bro. Oh my God. I can't.
Oh, me God.
Oh my God. Listen, it was a long day, people. All right. I'm very dehydrated right now.
I'd like to also thank Rob for the music. Everybody loves it. Keep loving it.
You're very aggressive today. What's the matter with you?
I'm feeling great, you know? I'm in the routine a little bit. It's my first week. It's almost over. And next week, if I could do one more week in a row, that's 2 weeks. That's usually my threshold. Once I get past the 14 days, now it's a habit for me.
Oh, so your habit usually breaks before 14 days.
Every time. I don't even get to 10 days, and then it's over.
So do you have plans for 4th of July?
Yes, I do.
What are you doing for 4th of July?
I'm going to eat a little bit.
Falling off that wagon.
I might drink a little something and then just have a
Lemonade.
little fun, you know? Sometimes it's okay to get out there and let loose, but you can't be doing it more than once a week. I can't.
How many tubs of Haagen-Dazs are you going to have?
No
for the 4th of
Haagen-Dazs.
July? S'mores?
I'm doing a hot dog eating contest with myself.
Oh, that's great. What kind of hot dogs are we eating?
Just whatever they got. I'm going to somebody's house. My friends, they throw a party every year, big party, and they got food.
Is it Sabret? Sabret.com? Ballpark? Ballpark.com.
Oh, let's go. Call them up.
Already reached out. Rejected.
It's fine. We don't need a sponsor. We're having fun here. That's all that matters.
We have a sponsor.
We don't need any more sponsors.
All
You
right,
are the
okay.
best sponsor of all time, Dave.
Thank you. Why are you pumping me up so much? I don't need the pump up.
You just seem a little down today. I'm trying to do a little pick-me-up.
Long day. So, everyone, if you own a gym, it is time to open up.
This is how we do it.
What is that?
I like to sing a little.
I like when you sing, but you haven't been singing lately.
I'm not doing any more. That was it for this episode.
Why are you waving the magic wand around like that?
Don't talk about it. Be about it.
What?
I'm just trying to confuse you. What do we got
You
going?
are confusing
I know.
me.
What do we got going on for next week?
Oh, man. Next week, lucky number 13,
It's my favorite number.
Gary V.
No,
No.
don't say that. Come on. That's false advertising.
There you go.
Gary Fernandez is one of my
Yes.
best friends. He's our first guest that is not a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a purple belt, but he is an expert in health and fitness as well as a highly successful businessman, and he talks to us about how to be better at marketing and business, among other things.
I'm really more excited to hear his podcast that we are guests
Yes,
on.
we were also a guest on his podcast. If you guys like to check it out, our episode's not out yet, but you could go to,
Real Talk with G.
there you go. So that's all I got. You got anything else?
I don't know. Let me think.
Shut it down. Your brain cells are just not working today.
It was a long day. It's Friday. I'm always shot by Friday. I definitely like doing this, not Friday.
All right. Well,
What am I saying?
We just learned a lesson now, so we'll do it another day.
Follow us on all of our social media at To The Death Podcast. Also, email to the death podcast at gmail.com, and be sure and check out our website, tothedeathpodcast.com. Rate, review, like, follow, subscribe.
And remember, we're on all the podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify. We're even on YouTube. So that's it.
Yes, so if you want to see Ed as a white belt doing the same exact stuff he does now, definitely go to our link tree and check out that match.
And you guys will be very happy in the next coming weeks. We will be putting more and more stuff on there. So hopefully you guys check it out. This is To The Death Podcast.
Episode 12.